So we really need to talk about wire and wire connectors because nowadays on the internet, a lot of people are getting away with selling cheap wire and cheap connectors. And the reason this is so bad is because if you have a single bad wire or connector in your system, you can potentially cause a fire and burn down your whole house or your RV or van or wherever your solar power system is located. And over the years, I have recommended people buy specific wires through my website. I say, buy this, don't think about it, don't look at any other options. 90% of the market is trash. Just buy this wire, it's safety certified, UL listed. But I want people to know why I recommend these types of wire and why the cheap ones fail. So first we're going to start with the most common problems that I see, and then we will dive deeper into the details. So let's get started. So first let's talk about copper clad aluminum. This is aluminum wire that is covered in copper, and this is the worst stuff that you can possibly use, and it is all over Amazon. Here is another example of copper clad aluminum. It will even say on the listing on Amazon that it's copper, and as you can see, it actually looks like copper, but this is aluminum wire, and if you connect large inverters to this, you will have problems. This is the number one cause of problems when connecting inverters because many cheap inverters come with this wire, and when you try to push large loads through this, it just simply does not work because aluminum cannot carry the same amount of amps as pure copper. And when people size their system with copper wire gauges off of the internet and then they use an aluminum conductor, guess what? They do not size it properly. Technically, you can use aluminum wire, but you would have to size it perfectly, and a lot of people, when browsing the internet using wire gauge charts, will not size it properly with aluminum. Now let's talk about why aluminum is so bad besides just not sizing it correctly. First of all, when you connect aluminum wire to a copper lug, guess what? Aluminum and copper expand and contract at different rates or different sizes. The aluminum will expand and contract more than the copper. And guess what these wires do? They get hot and they get cold when you push large loads through them. So when you have aluminum expanding and contracting in a cold weld and it's surrounded by a copper lug, it will break free over time. The next problem I've noticed is that when you use aluminum with other types of metals, you will have faster rates of corrosion. And sometimes when I have a copper lug and I'm passing through it and there is lots of moisture around, I get lots of corrosion no matter what I try to do. I've had wires heat up and fail because they were just aluminum, and then I open it up, there's corrosion all over the whole thing. So for me, I just avoid it. It's just not something you should touch at all. But this stuff is all over Amazon. You can find these wires and people will be like, oh, 4-gauge wire for 20 bucks for this many feet. That's crazy. And they buy it. And this is not what you should be using. This can and will cause a fire if you use it. Every point of contact with every connector that's copper is going to be a potential fault point. So do not use this. This is one of the most common issues that I see, and people will have inverter shutdown issues and all sorts of other weird problems. So just avoid copper clad aluminum. You can always find on the Amazon listing where it says that. It will either say pure copper, or it will say oxygen free copper, or 99.9% copper, or it will say copper clad aluminum, CCA. So avoid this stuff like the plague. And before we move on to the other types of wire, I want to talk about another safety issue that we need to mention in the beginning of the video because some people are not going to watch this whole video, and that is cheap connectors. All right, these were bought off of Alibaba straight from China. If you look inside, it is the cheapest and smallest amount of copper that you could ever imagine. Do you see how much copper you get? That is pitiful. These are not UL listed. These are not safety rated. These are junk, and you do not want to buy these from China. And to make this example as clear as possible, this is the cheap one. Look how small the walls are. And this is the expensive UL listed beautiful connector with copper. Okay, this is what you want. This is what you don't want. But the big problem when choosing these connectors off of like Amazon or eBay is they do not show how thick the walls are. It is so hard to tell in those pictures. So typically what I like to do is I like to go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and they will have UL listed safety certified connectors with nice thick copper walls. And I think the best way that you can tell is that if you take your crimper and you go to crimp it, A cheap one will feel pathetic. It just squeezes instantly and it feels like there's nothing there. It is instantly crimpable, and this is not a solid, like this feels like nothing. But when you have a high quality one and you crimp it, you actually have to put some force and you feel it squeeze and mash, and it takes some effort to actually crimp the high quality ones. And if you use a single cheap connector in your system, I actually bought these off of Alibaba thinking that they were going to be high quality, but they were complete junk, and I kept them just for this video. And also, you will find cheap ones at Harbor Freight or Walmart, so you need to avoid those like the plague. You really need to look inside and see inside the box, see how thick those walls are. You will instantly find which ones are high quality or not based off of that. Now let's talk about lugs. So this is a high quality lug that's made out of pure copper, and it's very, very thick. This is very nice. This is for 4-gauge wire, and it's a beautiful lug. This is not. This is common off of Amazon, and the wall thickness is just pitiful on this one. If you mash this down, it looks like it got squeezed in half. When you mash this one down, it looks like a solid crimp. And let me show you an example of that. And this is a good example of a cheap lug connected to a high quality marine grade wire. Do you see how this crimp looks? This is not what your crimps should look like. There is not much metal in the walls, and it has just smashed the whole thing, and it looks like junk. This technically will work, and this is copper on copper, but this is not ideal. And this is a high quality lug with high quality wire. It just looks and feels different, and it is very, very strong. You cannot mess this up. The walls are very thick, and there is a true cold weld inside. If you cut this apart with a hacksaw, you will see a true cold weld. And this will last for a decade. This is very solid. So buy the high quality copper ones and avoid the cheap copper ones. Even though these are copper, they are too thin to be used. Now that we've covered copper clad aluminum and cheap connectors, we can finally move on to what kind of wire you should buy. So first off, you need pure copper always, and you need pure copper lugs. A copper to copper connection with a true cold weld with the crimp is the most ideal way to do it. And this is a high quality inverter cable. This is a 2/0 gauge wire, and this is crimped properly, and it has heat shrink. This will last for years and years. All of the metals in here are not dissimilar. You have a mechanical connection with the crimp, and so this will expand and contract together over time, and this heat shrink will protect the joint. But it is a gas tight joint because it is a crimp, so this is what you want. Copper with copper, and then a safety rated or certified insulation. And this is a very high quality and very expensive cable. This is like the best stuff on the planet. You can just feel how that pure copper feels. You have lots of strands, so you can carry a lot of current. Like, this is the best of the best. But when you're building your system, the most common copper wire that you will use for connecting inverters or solar charge controllers, and what you should use 99% of the time, is pure copper welding cable. And this insulation is nice and thick. It's what I recommend on my website for years and years now. And this is a very high quality wire. And what I love about copper welding cable is that it's easy to cut, strip, and crimp. So cutting it feels really good, and when you use a stripper like this one right here, you will feel it as you turn hit the paper wrap that covers the strands. So after I hear and feel it hit those pieces of paper, I can rip it off, and I know that none of these strands were damaged, and I can do a perfect crimp with every strand. So very easy to work with, very easy to crimp. Like, this is made to last very, very long. This is good stuff. And most off-grid solar suppliers will sell this high-quality welding cable. And when you have a high-quality cable and you want to connect it to a high-quality lug, you need to ensure that you're using the proper size wire for the lug and for your specified application. So if you have a short circuit or you have an overload situation, this wire and this connector will be able to carry the amount of current required for your system, for your specified application. So when you slip it over it, do you see how perfect that looks? And when you crimp this wire, it comes out looking great. This is a perfect crimp. These two are connected mechanically and it's a gas tight joint. This will last forever and will never cause a safety issue. And something that I see people suggest with crimping is to use like no locks inside of this joint. That is not true. You do not need no locks in a mechanical gas tight joint. You do need heat shrink to cover this and to protect this wire from flexing and causing lateral forces at the joint itself, but there is no point in putting anything in here. It should be copper to copper and it should be dry. If you learn about cold welding and physics, you will understand why. But if you're doing house wiring or marine application wiring and you have a joint that you have to screw down like a terminal, you absolutely need to use no locks or some kind of anti-corrosion or corrosion inhibitor. But for this, absolutely not. Copper to copper, and then cover it with either marine grade heat shrink if you're messing with water, or something else that's rated for your specified application. When you have a high quality connection, you can cut this apart and see a true cold weld. That is so important. So we went on a bit of a tangent, but this is high quality welding cable, but this is for indoor use only. If you are doing anything outside or around water or salt water or oil, you need a different kind of wire that is safety certified to handle that. So we have an example of marine grade tinned copper. And when you have a high quality marine grade wire, it will actually tell you. On here we have Anchor marine grade 6 gauge UL listed wire, boat cable, the voltage rating, and all sorts of other stats of what it can handle environment wise. This is a little hard to work with, but it will handle everything. If you match this with a pure copper lug that's tinned, and then you put heat shrink over that, it will handle water, salt, all sorts of crazy stuff. High quality stuff, very expensive. And you can use marine grade wire for pretty much any part of your solar power system if you can afford it. And in this video so far, we've talked about large, thick copper wires for connecting primary components such as inverters and solar charge controllers. But now we need to talk about smaller wires because you can only buy this down to like a 6 or an 8 gauge size. But if you want 10 or 12 gauge and you want to use typical connectors that you can buy at the store, you're going to want to use automotive or marine grade primary hookup wire. This is pure copper and it costs a lot. This is oil resistant, this is water resistant, it's easy to work with, and it does cost more than other options. You can go down to the store and find cheap wire at Harbor Freight that is still technically pure copper. It's not copper clad aluminum, but the sheath is not that nice, the insulation. Why I suggest everyone using automotive marine grade is this sheath is very strong. It can handle vibrations, it can handle years of abuse, it can handle moisture, and if you have a proper connection and you have a gas tight joint with a good crimp, this stuff will last for decades. But this is typically upwards of 40 amps maximum if you have a short run with 10 gauge wire. But yeah, please read my book if you want to know how to size wire. That's a totally different topic of conversation. And you can use primary hookup wire for pretty much everything if you use the proper size. But what if you have an appliance that's very small, like some small LED lights? What you want to use instead, and some people will disagree with me, okay, is speaker wire. You can buy oxygen-free copper speaker wire, and this insulation is plenty good if you're indoors, there's a low moisture environment, and you just want some cheap wire to hook up small appliances. Make sure that this isn't rubbing on anything and you have everything mounted securely, but this is great. You will not have losses, everything will work properly, and this is high quality copper. So I also have this on my website for very small appliances, and then this is for like medium size, and then we have the welding cable for big stuff. So yeah, all of these wires are pure copper, and that's very important. Now let's talk about solar wire. So this is a totally different application than all of these because these need to be UV rated or resistant for like 20 to 30 years. And we're going to talk about the differences. And this is the strongest wires ever. Like this stuff is incredible. Look at how thick the insulation is on this. And this one, this white stuff I bought at a warehouse in the Bay Area, and you will notice that the conductor is pretty small and you have a huge layer. There's 2 layers, and this will last 20 to 30 years in full sunlight in the desert. And there are lots of options when it comes to solar rated wire, but most of these are safety rated to the same standards. This one can handle 2000 volts, this one can handle 2000 volts, and it will say that it's UL listed and UV resistant. It says PV wire, it says solar wire. So it needs to say that if these wires are on the roof. If you use welding cable or you use primary hookup on the roof of a vehicle or a shed or a roof, this stuff will fall apart. I've made that mistake like 8 years ago when I built some of my first systems, and it literally fell apart within a year. So you absolutely need to use solar wire when connecting the solar panels to the solar charge controller. Typically, for most of our small systems, we use 10 gauge wire. It's easy to work with. You can use standard connectors. It works really well with the MC4 adapters. And if you wire your arrays properly and you're keeping it under 15 amps or even 5 amps for a lot of people, if you have just one series string and you don't have multiple parallel strings, a 10 gauge solar copper wire will work perfectly. But you need to use solar wire. Also, you can buy these off of the internet. This is the Windy Nation one, and it's high quality, and this is from a supplier in the Bay Area. But my favorite one that's easy to work with, not super thick, and is pure copper that you can just see how high quality this stuff is going to be by Timco. Timco has like every safety rating under the sun. This will last 30 years. You can put it underground. You can put it on the roof in Arizona. This stuff will not fall apart. And this is not sponsored. I've never been contacted by any of these wire companies. But Timco makes a really good wire. I have bought hundreds of dollars of this wire because I like it so much. The other stuff is good, but I feel like this is just welding cable and there's not multi-layer. This one is my favorite actually, but I can't buy it anymore. And this is really expensive stuff. But this is what you use for commercial grade systems. So this can handle all sorts of stuff. But yeah, like these two will handle 30 years no problem, and you can put it anywhere. But let's say you're on a budget. Is there a solar wire that you can buy that can still handle the current and the UV resistance? And there is. So this is low voltage landscaping wire. And so this is pure copper, and you can buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's, and it does work well. But I don't know how long it will work for. For a lot of my test arrays where I don't want to use Timco, I always use low voltage landscaping wire. It's very easy to connect to XT60 connectors. You have 2 conductors with 1 sheath, and this will handle the UV resistance just fine. You can actually bury this underground. Like the safety ratings are there, but this is not nearly as strong as a 30-year rated industrial grade. These are the same gauge of wire, and it's like double the thickness. Like there is no comparison to this stuff. But I know a lot of people, if you just have like 5 feet of wire going from one solar panel into a van, you can totally use this, but you need to seal it off very well. And you might run into some problems, and you need to heat shrink with like marine grade heat shrink if you want to waterproof tight this joint, because I've actually connected XT60 connectors to this, and I actually had it short out even with the heat shrink because it's not rated for that. So if you're trying to connect MC4 to low voltage landscaping, you might run into some issues. You'll be like, what the heck, this isn't made for it. It's because it's not made for it at all. But you can still use this. If you cut and strip everything and you use your own waterproof connectors, like if these were higher quality, like if you're using these marine grade terminal connectors, you can use them with this with solar panels, and it would be really cheap and it works really well. But I don't know how long it will work for, so I can't recommend it 100%. But it does work. It's safety certified, and it's better than the cheap wire that you'll find off of Amazon. Now let's talk about waterproof connectors, because you can buy these from China and they are dirt cheap, but 90% of them are complete junk. These ones are very high quality, but they cost a lot. This thing alone costs like 60 bucks. But you get 600 of them, and it lasts a long time. You have safety ratings, it's listed. And so these are high quality, but there's something you guys need to know. When you take a standard ratcheting crimper, it just does not like to crimp it down all the way. So when you crimp this down and you have a wire in here, this is not a true crimp. The walls are smaller than a standard UL listed connector, so you have to get tricky with these ones. So with watertight ones, whether it's China or not, whether it's UL listed or not, you need to use these kinds. Do not use the ratcheting crimper, because you want to feel the crimp and get it all the way down in there. And you'll feel the difference when you're crimping these. Just crimp a couple, as testing. Get some cheap ones to feel how those feel, and you'll be able to tell just by feeling it how high quality it is. These ones are high quality, but man, I just hate crimping this jacket. Look how bad this looks. Like, it never seems to come out looking good, and because you have to use these kinds of crimpers. So yeah, not a big fan, but these are great because they're waterproof, and I actually use these outdoors. I'll use a butt splice connector to connect solar wire for cheap, quick hookups. But yeah, typically you want to use the proper stuff for your job. So long story short, buy the more expensive ones and use the proper crimpers. Now that we're talking about wire, and I've gone on a million tangents, let's talk about wire strippers. So these are my favorite strippers on the planet. If you have a single conductor and it's under 10 gauge, these are what you want to use. They are $30 and they will last you the rest of your life. They're by Klein and I love them. It's so funny. I'll tell people, yeah, spend $100 on tools because you can only get like 3. Like, these were $30, these were $30, these were $30, so that's 90 bucks. But people will be like, no, Will, we should just buy the $10 ones at Harbor Freight. And the difference in a cheap wire stripper compared to a high quality Klein is not to be underestimated. They might look the same, but you need to spend more money on the tools to strip these wires. Another option that you have are these kinds of wire strippers. I used to use these a lot, but not so much anymore, because if you have a large wire, it can kind of crush the copper a little bit on one side. But if you have small wires, these work really well. So for anything under 12 gauge, I love these because they're fast and efficient, and I can actually strip multiple wires. When it comes to this one, this does a perfect job, absolutely perfect job every time, and you have to use the exact spot for the size wire that you're using. But you can't do multiple wires. Small wires, you have to kind of find where it is. So for this one, I use it from 14 gauge down to 10 gauge, and that's it. But that's a very common size. For any of the small BMS wires, I use this one. Another option that you have is, of course, the small little tiny wire strippers that come on some of the cutters and crimpers. I don't like these. Electricians love them because they're using solid core, so it's easier just to strip each and every individual solid core. When you have multi-strand, you don't want to mess with it. You need to use a higher quality one and so on and so forth. This is a very thick one though, so you're going to have to use one of these. This is a cable stripper, and we could talk all day about how cheap some of these are. This one's made in Germany, and it's probably the cheapest high quality one. Some of these are like $50 to $100 for the super high quality ones, but this one's just fine. This one works really well. There are lots of cheap ones on Amazon that are absolute junk. So yeah, just go to my website and see the one that I recommend, which is this one. It works every time. If you put it on there, you can spin it around and feel how deep it is. And then you can crank this just a little bit and make a perfect strip. So you want to spend more money and get the good strippers, because who cares if you have high quality wire and all this other stuff if you don't have tools to properly strip and crimp them. And yeah, lately I've been using this one up to 2 gauge, and then I use my hammer crimp, or I use a 3-point crimper. But this video is more for advanced users, I think, because I'm going on lots of tangents here. But you need to use high quality stuff. Spend the extra money and you'll be so much happier and better off. You will have things that will last a lifetime. I think that's all I wanted to cover. I just want to generally talk about all of these. I might make another video that's faster where I'm like, good crimp, bad wire, good wire. But for this one, I think a lot of people want to know these details. There's so much more to talk about, but yeah. That will give you the general idea. If you follow those rules and you use what I use on the website, you're done. You don't have to think, and you will have a solid system. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.